Hey, it's Robert Fiffin, and this is the 50 album challenge. I did it. I listened to 50 albums all the way through that I had not heard in a long time. I could have done the Save the Planet challenge or the Help the Homeless challenge. I decided to do the challenge where you basically just listen to a bunch of records. And this was started by the YouTube channel, Channel 33 RPM, one of the, obviously, the premier YouTube channels for the vinyl record community. Everybody knows that. So the thing was put out, a 50 album challenge. Listen to 50 albums that you haven't heard in a long time. I think the stipulations was like 2 years or something like that. I went ahead and went with 10 years. So these are all albums that I had not heard in like 10, 15, 20 years, some of them, and just did them all in, I think this took me like maybe a month and a half, 2 months to do the 50 album challenge. So I just heard all of these again. It was great to listen to all these albums that I had not heard in a long time. Please comment, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. If some of your favorites are in here, tell me what other albums are out there that I need to listen to that maybe I haven't. And this whole thing was to get you to listen to some different stuff. Like I said, I'm always listening to, you know, you're listening to Led Zeppelin all the time, and Black Sabbath, and Nirvana, and Aretha Franklin, and Kiss, and all that stuff over and over, the Beatles over and over again. So it was nice to delve a little deeper into the record collection here and pull out 50 albums that I had not heard in 10 years or more. So this is my 50 album challenge. Jimi Hendrix, Midnight Lightning. This is an album I had not heard in a very, very long time. Usually I go for the actual legitimate Jimi Hendrix releases. This is one that came out in, I believe, 1975. And basically it's one of those reprise albums put together by Alan Douglas, one of the engineers, where they take Jimi Hendrix's vocals and his guitar work and then replace everything else with newer musicians. I'm still not sure why they felt like they had to do that, but this definitely has more of a mid-70s feel than it does something that would have been done during Jimi Hendrix's actual lifetime. So again, you have Jimi Hendrix's great guitar, you have his vocals, but it's not his best work. It's basically stuff that, you know, was kind of shelved or maybe waiting for an upcoming release, not completed, and let's just take anything we can that has Jimi Hendrix on it and put it on an album and put that out. So it was great to hear. It's a nice album. It doesn't obviously compare to anything, you know, with The Experience or Band of Gypsies or anything, but it's nice. And it's nice to do exactly what, you know, this, you know, you pull it out every once in every 15 years or so and give it a spin. So that's about as high as I can recommend Jimi Hendrix Midnight Lightning, although great album artwork. Like that. Prince, For You. This is Prince's very first album. He's got an album after this. It's just called Prince, which a lot of people confuse that as the debut, but it's actually this one from 1978. And no real huge songs on here. This is really early Prince. There's a single, Soft and Wet, which is kind of a disco song that was you know, big on disco R&B stations and whatever for like 10 minutes. People didn't know who Prince was back then. This album really didn't do that well, but you can definitely hear what's coming up. I'll say it that way. A couple of decent album. What you really, with me listening to this for the first time in all these years, it's hard to listen to this without constantly being aware that this is one person who's like 17 years old doing everything: vocals, bass, drums, keyboards, synths, sequencing, everything. And then not to mention producing and writing all the songs and singing them. Is all Prince, and I'm just constantly aware of that the entire time I'm listening to that and just being amazed, kind of preoccupied being amazed with that and not really so much going, hey, this is great music, I want to listen to this album again. It kind of has that feel where it's more of like, oh wow, incredible, this guy did all this, than really something you want to listen to over and over again. Some decent songs on here though, especially this last song called I'm Yours. Don't forget that one if you're going to check this out. Go all the way to the end and check out I'm Yours. You get a lot of rock guitar in that, and he's just wailing pretty early on, kind of reminiscent of what he do later in like things like Let's Go Crazy and All the Critics Love You in New York and all that. Just that guitar is right here in 1978, just when disco is huge and the electric guitar is over here with the rock people and the disco is over here. He was melding all that together, very first release, all by himself. So an incredible talent on this album. Just there's much better music from him coming later. Temple of the Dog. This came out in 1991, and it was right before Soundgarden and Pearl Jam got super popular. And this is actually kind of like the drums and the vocals of Soundgarden mixed with everything else with Pearl Jam, pretty much. And just like a one-off for this particular band. And a lot of great stuff on here. This sounds a lot like Soundgarden, Bad Motorfinger type of production, more than it does Pearl Jam's 10. It doesn't have that huge kind of echoey kind of wide hall sound that Pearl Jam 10 has. It kind of got a cleaner mix on it. Like I said, like more like Soundgarden, Bad Motorfinger. And of course, Chris Cornell doing much of the vocals on here. Eddie Vedder joins in for Hunger Strike, which was the huge song on this. I remember Hunger Strike when it was out as a single was all over the radio. I mean, right as much as like Alive from Pearl Jam. I think Temple of the Dog was probably on the radio more than Soundgarden at that time with the Hunger Strike song. So a lot of great stuff on here. As far as the vinyl record though, again, it's one of those 90s promotional copy records, which, again, I don't think a lot of the attention was paid for the sound quality. You're basically trying to also fit 55 minutes of music, CD length basically, onto a single disc, which, it sounds a little flat, a little tight. So I would definitely recommend the stream or the CD, but record still sounds decent, and it's a great album. Willie Nelson, Stardust. I've got so many Willie Nelson albums that this one kind of gets neglected a little bit. It's just really, really, really mellow. And it's an all covers Willie Nelson album. All the Tin Pan Alley songs that he grew up with, he made an album of those. And so you miss the brilliant songwriting from Willie Nelson because these are all covers. But it does have George on My Mind and Blue Skies and Sunny Side of the Street and All of Me and all those songs. But just very, very, very mellow listening from Willie Nelson. 10cc, how dare you! Great cover art on this, first of all. It's one of the things I love about this. The thing I love about it is really the Hypnosis group put this cover together. They're the ones that did a lot of the Pink Floyd albums and a lot of the UK 70s stuff. That's really kind of interesting. Definitely my favorite artwork designing company for albums. Once again, Hypnosis. Not only do you get the 2 phone calls on the front, but you also get 2 completely different phone calls on the back as well, and a nice gatefold there. But as far as the music inside 10cc, they had the hits I'm Not in Love and The Things We Do for Love. Neither of those are on here, so you're not going to hear any super familiar songs on here. They're kind of silly. If you could imagine like a 70s version of the Beatles, when the Beatles are at their kind of most jovial and silly, that's 10cc. How Dare You is an instrumental that gets followed by Lazy Ways and I Want to Rule the World, which is just this guy chanting, I want to be the boss, I want to be the biggest boss, I want to be the biggest boss in the whole world. That over and over. It's kind of like almost listening to a soundtrack of sorts where you're not sure, if there's a plot somewhere. Song called Headroom on side 2, a little bit of an eye roll. Give me some head room, I just want some head room, with the big space between head and room. Ha ha. It's the kind of thing where you might hear it once and think, there's some interesting stuff on there, hear it twice, and then you really don't need to hear it much beyond that. Great ballad on here called Don't Hang Up, though, to end it up, that's totally not tongue-in-cheek. But 10cc, How Dare You? Good for a couple of spins. Black Sabbath. We sold our soul for rock and roll. This was actually the way that I was introduced to Black Sabbath, and I have not heard these songs in this order in quite a while, and I'm so glad I did with this 50 album challenge. What a great, what an incredible set of music, and yeah, I mean, just song after song after song. If I would trade Fairies Wear Boots for Wicked World, but other than that, this is just about perfect as far as an introduction to the Ozzy years going up to 1977. It's basically a lot of the first and second album. That makes up side 1 and side 2, and then the other 2 sides are basically a combination of the albums that followed that with a couple of songs from each one. But wow, what a collection. And like I said, if you could have one and one only like vinyl experience of Black Sabbath, I would choose this. I really would. This is just a great collection. Like I said, the way I was introduced to these guys. Only thing I really don't care for is the album artwork. I mean, I get the whole like sparse like black and red and white thing here, and it goes on in the back as well. But I really wish you could open this up and just see this incredible just montage of great Sabbath, type imagery, and instead you get this just woman in a coffin. So there's that. But yeah, no pictures of Black Sabbath themselves or anything. It's kind of notorious because I will admit, you know, it is a thing where apparently the record label put this out. The band didn't even know about it. And, but still, it's hard to argue this collection of music on an actual record that came out during that period. So yeah, definitely Black Sabbath. We sold our soul for rock and roll. Glad I got to revisit this one. Freddy Fender, Before the Next Teardrop Falls. I have had this album since I've been about 5 years old or 6 years old. I may have got this new. I don't remember. But great little album. Of course, the two big, huge Freddy Fender hits, Before the Next Teardrop Falls, Wasted Days, Wasted Nights, are both on here. But there's other nice songs on here, too. You Can't Get Here From There is a great song. He does some Spanish kind of Tex-Mex stuff on here too. You probably want to skip over the very first track if you don't have a lot of time. Roses Are Red, Violets Are Blue. It's not a Bobby Vinton remake. I'm not sure why we start off with that song, but a decent album over. That's a great album, actually. And, you know, it's kind of like the Johnny Rodriguez Tex-Mex kind of country sound from the 70s. But I had to decide which one I wanted to listen to. Freddy Fender, Busted for Weed. Johnny Rodriguez, Busted for Stealing a Goat. I went ahead and went with the weed. Blue Oyster Cult, Secret Treaties. This is one of their earlier albums. This is like maybe their third, fourth album. I could be wrong. But I haven't heard this in a long time. I used to listen to this a lot back in college when I first picked it up for like a buck somewhere. And Career of Evil's on here. And the rest of it is pretty obscure stuff. You don't hear a lot of this stuff on the radio or whatever. No, Don't Fear the Reaper, Burning for You, or anything like that. But kind of the almost creepy, kind of cryptic lyrics from Blue Oyster Cult. Their whole sound really was like that. They kind of pioneered that weird kind of rock stuff if you were wanting to get away from, you know, drinking and girls and cars. Although they did have songs, some songs about that as well. Just a little weirder with the Blue Oyster Cult, and it really all kind of sounds kind of tame as far as that aspect. But you can still get some good rock guitar in here, and great rock songs too. There's really not too bad of a song on here. It's pretty solid all the way through. So if you like Blue Oyster Cult, definitely I would recommend Secret Treaties. White Zombie, Les Exorcisto, Devil Music Volume 1. Another one that I got in college. Another one of the hard rock, hard-hitting kind of stuff that was kind of over the top at the time and now just seems kind of pedestrian and quaint in a way. I still love Rob Zombie's sense of humor. I still love all of the references. I felt like when I was listening to this back in college that I had to be like one of the only people that got all the Russ Meyer stuff and knew that, oh my God, that's from Faster Pussycat Kill Kill or whatever. But now, of course, you can go on Wikipedia and see where all the samples are from and where they got this line and that line and all that kind of stuff. But one of the first things that I noticed about this when I was listening to it way back in college, I remember, is the way they used all those movie clips and things like that. And that wasn't really done a lot in, especially hard rock, you know, or heavy metal or whatever in those days. And now it just pops up, you know, everywhere, rap and pop music and all that kind of stuff. But I remember White Zombie. I really liked them a lot more than the Rob Zombie solo stuff. One reason is because drums, real drums. I love real drums. I was so, I don't know, disenchanted when everything started going to like computerized, you know, drum machines and lining up drum tracks perfectly and stuff like that. I love how we're right there in 1993, 94. We're right before everything starts going to computer and digital and all that, and they were still using real drums in this, even though they've got the sequencing and the keyboards and all the other stuff in there as well. Heavy metal with a bit of a disco beat. I mean, I still love White Zombie's Les Exorcisto miles more, like I said, than I love the Rob Zombie solo. And it's been about exactly 10 years, I think, since I've heard this one. So great to revisit this again, even though I still remember a lot of it. And Thunder Kiss 65, still one of my favorite songs. So definitely loving the Les Exorcisto from White Zombie. The Tramps, Disco Inferno. I tell you what, I love that shoe and that foot there. This is a great album cover. Big disco group here. Real kind of raw, kind of soulful vocals, especially for a disco group. There's quite a few members of this band. Now, this is a disco, so the songs are like 8-9 minutes long a piece. There's only 3 on a side. Some of the songs are pretty good, but they're just way too long. It's supposed to be like played in a disco club where everybody's all coked up and forgot that it's 4 o'clock in the morning. But just as casual listening, these songs are too long. Disco Inferno on here, 11 minutes long. It's the same version that's on the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack. So why not just listen to that? And then you get Bee Gees songs and Yvonne Elliman and Casey and the Sunshine Band too. But still, love that foot, love that shoe. Disco Inferno from the Tramps. Love this album cover. In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. So basically, the question with this album, of course, is what does side 1 sound like? Since side 2, the whole thing is In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, all 17 minutes of it. Side 1, very, very heavy on the organ, as you would expect if you know the song In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida or you know anything about Iron Butterfly. A lot of the organ on here, and really just kind of like general kind of songs. They're not bad, but I don't think any stand out huge. There's no like runaway home run hits. And as a matter of fact, listening to side 1 being so unfamiliar, and then turning the record over and hearing the the huge chords and the huge riff of In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida immediately right after the little intro there, it really kind of like doesn't sound like the same album, but it is. And I'm curious. I wonder if there's any other albums where like one side is completely unfamiliar and the other side is totally familiar, start to finish. I wonder if there's any other albums that are like that. Please comment if you can think of any other albums where one side just start to finish, everybody knows it, and then like the other side, nobody knows any of it. If they're, you know what, the Toronto Peace album from John and Yoko could be considered kind of like that. But yeah, In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, obviously the big 17-minute long version. That's quite an undertaking. That's you gotta set aside time to listen to that, I guess, like you would any album. But that's what's great about albums is you could have 17-minute long songs on there. So definitely a relic from the psychedelic late 60s. Like I said, side 1, the songs on there, not bad. It sounds like Iron Butterfly. It has the big organ riffs in it and stuff, but nothing is going to compare to side 2. Georgia Satellites, their first album. Awesome. I'm glad I got reacquainted with this. Keep Your Hands to Yourself kicks it off. Everybody knows that song. And the rest of the album is kind of in that vein. I remember this came out, that song came out on the radio in the mid-'80s. As kind of basic and straightforward rock and roll as it sounds, it didn't seem like there was a lot of other stuff on the radio that sounded like that at the time. With the real guitars and the real drums and everything and that kind of southern rock sound. So it was glad to have these guys around. And this album kicks all the way through. You've got your basic straightforward rock, if that's what you're into. Kind of barroom blues rock with a little bit of country elements in some of the songs. You got to check out Georgia Satellite's debut, although I'm sure you probably already have. Just check it out again. That's my advice. I definitely put this at one of the top of my... top 50 album challenge albums because, like I said, glad I got reacquainted with this. This is really good stuff from Georgia Satellites. Elf, Trying to Burn the Sun. This is Ronnie James Dio before he was Dio and Rainbow and Black Sabbath with Dio and all that. I believe this was their last album with him. I'm not quite sure about that, though. It's called Trying to Burn the Sun. The band is Elf, and it's a decent album. It's not what you'd expect, though, from Ronnie James Dio. If you're a big metal fan, you love all the Dio stuff, this is definitely different. This is more of just your basic good time rock with a good time honky-tonk kind of piano going on and songs literally called good time music. What's the love song on there? When She Smiles. Now, you know that Dio never had a song called When She Smiles, but Elf with Ronnie James Dio does. So, a pretty good album. It's fun. It's definitely 70s, early 70s kind of feel to this, but it is not metal. It's not hard rock. And if you're a big fan of Ronnie James Dio and you've never heard Elf, it's probably not what you'd expect. It actually kind of reminds me of Nazareth Exercises. This is Nazareth's second album, and if you know a lot of Nazareth songs but you never heard this one, it might sound a little different, take you by surprise. It doesn't sound anything like Hair of the Dog. There's no like hard rock, heavy metal type stuff on here. This is got a different sound for these guys, and I think that's what's caused this to get some bad reviews, because it's not that bad of an album. It's just completely different from what you'd expect from Nazareth. A lot of like acoustic kind of good time picking, almost country flavored type songs on here. A little like Doobie Brothers or something like that. Definitely sounds like 1972, sounds like it could be, Sugarloaf or something like that, or even something a little lighter than that. It actually starts off with a song that's completely different than any of that. It's this kind of soaring, horn-filled, epic-sounding thing. Sounds like something out of Braveheart or something called I Will Not Be Led. It's like an ode to atheism that starts off this album. There's a couple of good time songs in here, though, if you're in the mood for some like country-flavored good time early 70s music, like Fool About You, Cat's Eye Apple Pie. Some decent stuff on here. Again, if you want the hard rock in Nazareth, this is definitely an album that you want to stay away from. But if you want a little bit of a different sound, just kind of a curiosity, see what this is like, it's not too bad. Bad Religion, How Can Hell Be Any Worse? I believe this is, if not their first album, it's definitely one of their first. And it's just the basic punk rock all the way through. Really early Bad Religion. And it's just, you know, hit the record button and record the punk rock band doing, you know, 5 songs, 5 more, whatever. These all sound like they're from about 3 different recording sessions. And you can actually hear the difference in the kind of the sound quality and the ambiance and all that with these songs. But just great melodic punk rock songs. You can find those little melodies in here. Of course, Bad Religion, one of the premier punk rock bands that went on to be, you know, to change their sound up, modernize, and just keep on going for decades, basically. So great to hear this early one. I had not heard this in about 15 years or so. I know I got this when I was in college back in the mid-early 90s, and it was great to hear this again. A lot of great, little short, you know, 2-minute long punk rock songs on here. But it's fun to hear the lyrics and hear how some of the things that they were, you know, complaining about or bringing to light still going on today. There's still a lot of relevant lyrics in here. And then there's a couple, like Latchkey Kid and whatever, where it's like, well, it didn't quite turn out that way. It kind of turned out the opposite, actually. So Bad Religion, How Could Hell Be Any Worse? Interesting for different reasons, actually. There's multi-levels of interest for this one. But overall, just a great little punk rock album that just 2 little minutes short blasts of punk rock. B.B. King live in Cook County Jail. This was the second B.B. King album I ever heard. The first one was the best of B.B. King, and they both start the same way, with the Cook County Jail introduction where the woman is introducing the sheriff and everybody boos. You know, that's just, I don't know, that's always been funny to me. It's just a fun way to start off a live album recorded in a jail. So yeah, this album, I love the way this sounds. I've been spending the last few years listening to other B.B. King albums that I've acquired since then. Maybe it's been 8 years or so. I mean, it may not have been a full 10 or 15 years since I've heard this one, but I break the rules for an album recorded in a jail. It's only fitting. But I love the way this sounds. You can hear every instrument, and there's only a few, but it's so well mixed, and it's got that real thin Memphis, Chicago style. Your blues guitar, you'd expect that obviously from B.B. King, but the horns are mixed that way, and the drums have got that real good, tight, you know, bop drum sound. So I love the way this sounds. I love the monologues he does when he's talking to the audience. I love the songs on here. Everything about this album works. The fact that it was recorded in a jail, and it's, you know, blues album in a house of incarceration. You don't get much more blues than that. So Every Day I Have the Blues is on here. How Blue Can You Get is on here. He does a melody of some of his really early stuff, and just a lot of fun. It's real kind of short though, kind of a short album. It's kind of over. It was like, oh, that's it. But yeah, B.B. King live in Cook County Jail. If you don't have any B.B. King, and you want to start with an album instead of a compilation, this is a pretty good one. Waylon Jennings, I've Always Been Crazy. Waylon Jennings has always put out fantastic albums, and not just songs, but albums. He and Willie Nelson and David Allan Coe and a few others always had that album kind of mentality when putting things out, and that's why you love to listen to their albums. The 3 ones that I really like, he's kind of got like a triple play of just knockout albums. Honky Tonk Heroes, The Ramblin' Man, and Lonesome Henry and Mean are 3 of his greatest albums coming out right in a row. This one was a couple years after that, but it's still great. I just have so much Waylon Jennings, I don't get to listen to all of it all the time, and I haven't heard this one in a while. Glad I did, though. I've Always Been Crazy was a hit song that was on here. Also, Don't Y'all Think This Outlaw Bit's Done Got Out of Hand? That follows that. And those are the 2 singles. I don't think there's another big single on here. But Waylon Jennings, especially the song I just mentioned, you know, when you hear him, especially in this era, he's basically singing about himself and things that you could read about, you know, or know about from the tabloids or whatever, or the country music magazines. So not only do you get the love songs and the good time songs, but you get songs where he's actually talking about himself as sort of this figure of incredible, like, you know, people are fascinated in reading about him, and he knows that you get the references. He makes references to the Plain Seat with Buddy Holly in here without going any more in depth into it. It just passes along. So you got to kind of know a little bit about Waylon Jennings, the person and his life, to really fully appreciate some of these songs. But some funny stuff on here as the Billy World turns. It's kind of a strange time, the signature kind of song that ends side one. And then side two starts with a medley of Buddy Holly hits. And as soon as I saw that, I'm like, oh, great, great. Cover songs and medleys and whatever. But this one, he actually does an excellent job at these Buddy Holly songs. And, you know, Waylon Jennings obviously should. You know, you wouldn't expect less. I Walk the Line follows that. He does a version of Johnny Cash's I Walk the Line. Does a completely different style, and then follows that up with a Merle Haggard cover, Tonight the Bottle Let Me Down. So there's all kinds of interesting things. Not only do you get Waylon Jennings, but you get Waylon Jennings paying tribute to some of his contemporaries as well. So this was, I would put this up with the best. You know, I was actually pleasantly surprised to find out that, I knew it would be good, but I didn't know it would be just as excellent as any of the other ones. Waylon Jennings, I've always been crazy. Kiss My Ass, classic Kiss regrooved. This is a tribute album. A lot of tribute albums are kind of lame. It's usually just kind of stuff thrown together, and this one is no exception. It starts off with Lenny Kravitz doing Deuce, which is pretty cool, actually. It's like a funky version with harmonica and everything, which if you know the Deuce song from Kiss, it kind of lends itself to that. You can see that. And then Garth Brooks shows up to do, you know, basically country song anyway with Hard Luck Woman. Anthrax, kind of a lazy version of She, and then Gin Blossoms doing Christine 16. Toad the Wet Sprocket doing some joke version of Rock and Roll All Night. It's not funny, you know, slowed down ballad, Rock and Roll All Night, haha. So one of the more interesting ones on here is Maynard James Keenan from Tool. A couple guys, Tom Morello, Brad Wilk from Rage Against the Machine doing Calling Dr. Love, and they call themselves Shondy's Addiction. And as far as I know, that's the only Shondy's Addiction you're going to find, is these guys doing Calling Dr. Love on this Kiss My Ass thing. By the way, here is the middle of that, the centerfold. Okay, so Going Blind, Dinosaur Jr. starts side two. Nice to hear his voice again. Jay Mascis, I haven't heard some Dinosaur Jr. in a while. Strutter from Extreme, that sounds exactly like you probably think it would. Lemonheads doing, you know, Plaster Caster, Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, Detroit Rock City. So it's really a bunch of the 90s kind of pop alternative people attempting Kiss, which really, especially the early stuff like this that I grew up with as a kid listening to, it's like, that music's the perfect music for Kiss. I mean, that really went together well with them. And for other bands to try to do it, I mean, I get it, they got stuff to sell here, but it's really just kind of like, what's the point other than that? You get an orchestral version of Black Diamond that goes on for 7 minutes. And if you have the record, you get the German version from Die Ärzte called Unholy, which also goes into I Was Made for Loving You, which is actually one of the more fun things on the whole album. And I don't actually think it's on the CD. Kiss My Ass, yeah, I'm going to put... I don't think I've heard... In fact, I know I had not heard this since I got this in college in like 94, I think it was. So I'm going to put it back for another 25 years or so, and we'll get it out next time we do a challenge in 2045. Jethro Tull, this is the front, and this is the back. I love the fact that they look like a bunch of old men on here, and they are a bunch of old men now. But yeah, Jethro Tull, the original lineup of like only 2 albums with that lineup, maybe the only album with that lineup. But great record, a lot of blues going on here. You know, I love the sound of, you know, when it's an album and there's just really a few basic instruments playing. You got the bass, guitar, a lot of acoustics, drums, and everything is just kind of pretty much clean right through the board there, and that's how this one is, with of course the flute as well. So if you're not into flute rock, it doesn't really overpower or overtake the music like some later Jethro Tull. It's pretty much just another instrument here. So if you hate the flute, it's okay. This has not got that much flute in it, but I think it's a great album. I don't listen to a lot of Jethro Tull, so I was glad to actually pick this one out again after like over a decade, and check out again. This was from Jethro Tull. I like their version of I don't know if it was Cream that came out with it, but I know Cream did it first. The Cat Squirrel is on here, instrumentals, so some great tunes. Which I was going to actually pick out a couple of titles. But this is extremely hard to read, and it is yellow on orange. Yeah, welcome to, we're still in psychedelic land here when this came out. Queen 2. Obviously some early Queen here. This is more of a prog rock type thing when they were doing that stuff. I mean, you've got titles like Ogre Battle and the Fairy Fellers, Master Stroke, and the March of the Black Queen. So, yeah, definitely some different stuff if you're used to their later 70s or 80s output. But, yeah, Queen 2, great rock album. Definitely some great guitar work, as always, on Queen albums from Brian May and Freddie Mercury, obviously. I listened to a lot of Queen a while back. Got all the albums out and was listening to Queen back when Bohemian Rhapsody, the movie, came out. But I skipped over this one. Not as big of a fan as this one, but definitely this particular record sounds awful. This is according to Discogs, this is the only pressing of this. But this is the Elektra, the red and black label one. This is from like the mid to late 80s. And it just sounds very, very compressed, very boxy, just like almost like a third generation type thing. I'm really surprised that a label like Elektra would even put something like that out, but they did. And I'm not sure about the earlier ones. Like if you have the Butterfly label or maybe the regular red Elektra, maybe you could leave in the comments whether those sound better, or the UK pressing or something. I know I listened to the CD and the stream, and it definitely sounds better, a lot better than this record. I get the whole Roy Thomas Baker kind of wall of sound production, but it sounds like they didn't really, whoever engineered this particular pressing or whatever, didn't know how to handle that. But otherwise, Queen 2, not a bad Queen album, just some early prog rock from Queen, just a little different than maybe what you're used to from these guys. But I would definitely love to hear comments about possibly some better pressings to listen to this. Tool, Undertow. I have not heard this all the way through nonstop in quite a while. I've heard a lot of Tool music, but not really sat down, gave it my full attention, listened to it all the way through. And I've got to say, I've got the CD, I've got the double album vinyl, which is up there behind me, hiding on the wall in a frame. But I got to say, if you want to listen to the album, the record of this, that would be the way to do it. This is the promotional, as you can see, gray vinyl record of Tool, and it's only one. So Disgustipated, the final track, is not on here, and the grooves are still really tight. It doesn't have very good fidelity, and quite honestly, this came out, I got this in college as a promotional item when I was on college radio, and I don't think they really put the same care, it seemed like, into pressings in the 90s, especially promotional items, that they would now, as a matter of fact. So this is more of a, I think, kind of really, honestly, kind of a novelty item from back then, but I did keep it, and so I gave it a listen. And by the way, Tool, great album, Undertow. I forgot to say that. So yeah, great album, hard-hitting, still after all these years, still sounds progressive, still sounds like, just kind of mind-blowing stuff, songs that just, it is one of those things where you kind of really need to give it your full attention. It's not really good for like background music or something like that. You have to, it commands kind of your full attention. Now, it's at this time I would like to take time out to actually thank the good people at Channel 33 RPM for coming up with this or putting this out there, the 50 album challenge. Otherwise, I don't know how long it would have taken for me to rediscover this one. Greg Allman, Laid Back. This is an absolutely phenomenal album. I love this thing, and usually I'm always going for the Allman Brothers Band and skipping over the solo stuff, even though, well, it would be right next to it alphabetically, wouldn't it? But yeah, his own solo version of Midnight Rider kicks this off. There's so many great songs on here. His solo version of Please Call Home is on here. Just great songs all the way through, and then it ends like an Elvis album or like a Willie Nelson album with just a spiritual out of nowhere, Will the Circle Be Unbroken. So Greg Allman, there's the inside of it. I love this is early enough where you could still be Southern rock and actually still be trippy at the same time. They didn't do that later on. Greg Allman, Laid Back. After this 50 album challenge is over, I could pretty much guarantee you this will end up in my top 5 of these rediscovered albums. I'm so glad I got to listen to this again. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Greg Allman, Laid Back. Definitely recommended. Target, Captured. Don't you just love that cover? I wanted to hear this, actually, because of the cover. Because I got this book when I was like 9 or 10 years old that had all these rock and roll or music album covers. It was called The Face of Rock and Roll. And I'm not sure why this album was in there, because it had like Simon and Garfunkel and the Beatles and all these great albums, Elvis and all that. And then it had this. So I'm assuming this was a new album at the time, and they got it for free, and that's why it was in the book. But Target is the band name, and I actually found out it's Jamie Jamison from Survivor. The guy that sings Eye of the Tiger is the lead singer for this, but still, you gotta love that album artwork. It really is the best thing about this. It's basically a band that sounds like Bad Company, or, you know, not a good version of Bad Company. The vocals obviously are Jamie Jamison. They're all right, but I think everything is mixed strange. Like the vocals are way out front, so much so that you can hear the echo above all the other instruments. The lead guitar is like way in the back, and it kind of sounds mixed like it's an 80s commercial jingle or something like that. So I would not recommend this, but I am glad that I finally was able to hear the album for the cover that I'd seen since I'd been 10 years old. Target captured. Anthem of the Sun, that's the Grateful Dead. This is their second album. This is the 1971 remix version. Now, this got remixed about 3 years after it came out. I've never heard the original 1968 mix, but this is like more experimental for these guys. This one is the one where they took like audio from different concerts and different studio things and tried to meld it all together. Sometimes it's worked. There's some really great transitions on here, going from one song to a completely different song and making it just sound wild and seamless. But overall, there's not really a big standout cut on here. It just kind of starts to meander a little bit. A lot of that big, long jamming and noodling with the Grateful Dead starts with this album, Anthem of the Sun. Roberta Flack, First Take. That means that's her very first album, and it's a great album. If you've only ever heard her song, The First Time Ever I Saw Your Face, which is on here, a little bit of elevator music, real light, kind of the thing, you know, grandma listens to or whatever. But this whole album is filled with all kinds of different sounds. It starts out with a real kind of smoky jazz club sound on a social awareness song called Compared to What. That is followed up by like a Spanish opera. We get a little gospel after that. So there's all kinds of different feels in this album, other than just your super easy listening First Time I Ever Saw Your Face song. Although that is represented. No Killing Me Softly, though. That's a different album. But overall, great album, well produced. And this is one of those albums that sounds great on a record. If you really like the smoky jazz club where it's kind of minimalist, you know, just the bass, you know, upright bass, guitar, or actually no guitar, upright bass, drums, and piano. If you like that sound, you will love the way this sounds on vinyl. I would definitely pick it up. And what can you say about Roberta Flack's voice? I mean, just listen to it, and that's all you need. Roberta Flack, First Take. I definitely recommend this. Cream, Disraeli Gears. I remember, I haven't listened to this in a while. I got this back in probably the 90s, and got it used, and I think this is probably maybe a first. If it's an early label, but it sounds kind of flat. I've heard that you definitely want to get the UK version of this for the best sound, but I remember not caring much for this, and I kind of kept it away, listened to other Cream albums if I want to hear Cream, or just Eric Clapton, but just heard this again, and it's great. I don't know what my problem was. Maybe I was having a bad day, or some bad days whenever I listened to this before. But it's great. It's got great tracks on here. Obviously, Strange Brew is on here. Sunshine of Your Love, Tales Brave Ulysses. Those were all on kind of like greatest hits stuff. But a lot of great stuff on here. You could do without the last, I don't know, maybe the last track where it's just kind of a... Well, you'll have to hear it. But the rest of this album is great. I mean, definitely one of the best rock albums of the 60s. Cream, Disraeli Gears. I don't know why. Just didn't put it up there with the other Cream albums before. But after a more recent listen, yeah, it's pretty excellent. John Mellencamp, The Lonesome Jubilee. I had not heard this in a while, although I do like John Mellencamp a lot. This one was a one that just kind of sat for a decade or so I thought I'd pull this one out. Nice gatefold. Love the lyrics on the inside, and the photo actually becomes a little bit longer there with a wonderful picture of a jukebox on the back. Love that as well. John Cougar Mellencamp, as he's still known, when The Lonesome Jubilee was out. This was quite a, looking back, this is quite a challenging kind of like daring thing for him to do at the height of his popularity. Come out with an album with a sound, almost like a Zydeco sound or kind of thing going on with accordions and mandolins and whatever, and really not a lot of rock guitar or anything like that, like you're used to like Jack and Diane or Pink Houses or something like that. So pretty daring move, and I think it paid off. It's a pretty good album all the way through. Of course, the big songs were Check It Out, Paper and Fire, and Cherry Bomb, which are all on side 1. So side 2 is kind of like a, you get to hear a bunch of stuff you haven't heard in quite a long time. If this is one of those, like for me, like an album I haven't heard in over a decade. So the Lonesome Jubilee, I would definitely recommend, especially if you're a John Mellencamp fan. But just the great thing about it being an album to listen to, it does kind of have an overall sound. It just doesn't sound like a bunch of songs thrown together. It sounds like there's an actual theme to the music. It sounds like the songs go together. They're supposed to be together on an album. So this is a great example of an actual album to listen to. However, I don't know if it's just my pressing or not, but this particular vinyl record doesn't really sound that good. It's a little bit flat, and there's a lot of sibilance. So maybe check out the CD or the stream, but I still love the big artwork, and I still love the fact that this, as far as the songs on it, sounds like a great album. German band Accept with their very first album just called Accept. Now these are the guys that did Balls to the Wall. Great rock band from Germany, and a lot of people hate on this first album, say it's unfocused, it's horrible. It's not horrible, it's not unfocused, it just doesn't sound like the rest of their stuff, but it's still great rock and roll. Guitar driven, Udo's vocals, you gotta love that guy. Lady Lou, Tired of Me, a great 2-song set to kick it off. And she's got my back to the wall! Yeah, they still have their big, thick German accents, and this is good stuff. I love this album. Bob Marley, Knotty Dread. Got this one out just because, it's springtime, summer's coming, and it's been raining nonstop. I thought maybe the sunshine would come out and get some Bob Marley on. It didn't happen, but a great album nonetheless. I don't remember the last time I listened to this, but it might have actually been January 1st of 2000, because I remember on New Year's Day of the new millennium, we wanted to listen to, me and my friends wanted to listen to a bunch of, uplifting, positive, beautiful day kind of, releases, and Bob Marley, Knotty Dread is what we pretty much came up with. This one isn't as popular as like Catch a Fire or certainly the Legend compilation. If you haven't heard that and you want to get into Bob Marley, that's where you start with the compilation called Legend. But this is it's still kind of in that vein of Catch a Fire, where it's kind of like rock producers working with Bob Marley to give it more of a commercial American sound. It's not quite as dancey or dub as he gets later with releases like Exodus or Babylon by Bus or whatever, but it's still a great release with the studio version of No Woman, No Cry, which I prefer over the live one that's on Legend, and a bunch of other great songs on here, like 3 O'Clock Roadblock is one of them, Belly's Full, but We're Still Hungry, that's another great one. A lot of great music on this, and it's Bob Marley, prime Bob Marley. How can you go wrong? This is when you get Bob Marley, you want to look for the actual legitimate Island Records releases and not some of these knockoff early Jamaican things that they've culled together out of studio throwaways or whatever. This is, and if you do that, and if you go with the legitimate Bob Marley, it's hard to go wrong. They're all great, and this is no exception. Knotty Dread from Bob Marley and the Wailers. Elvis Presley in person at the International Hotel, Las Vegas, Nevada. This started off a double album, and the other album was called Back in Memphis. This is a live album, of course, and then the other one was a studio. They split those up like a year after they were released, and then released them individually. So this is a real tight concert. It's only one record, and it really sticks to the Blue Suede Shoes, Johnny B. Good, All Shook Up, Suspicious Minds in the Ghetto, all the Elvis hits. And whereas other live albums that I'm more familiar with, I grew up listening to Aloha from Hawaii. I've heard that thing like 1,000 times. And it's got a lot of the typical like Vegas type stuff in there. Like You Gave Me a Mountain and What Now My Love and things like that. This, he sticks to pretty much his own stuff with the exception of Words. Is kind of like the only kind of show stage song on this. So real tight, very live from very early in his Las Vegas years. I got so much Elvis Presley that I haven't heard this one in a while, so it was nice to dig this out and listen to it again. Not exactly earth-shattering, but a decent concert, and it's pretty good on here. None of these are better than the originals, though. If you don't have any Elvis, or maybe you've never heard of Elvis Presley and you want to start listening to his music, I would definitely suggest doing the studio versions first before you go to a live album, especially the Vegas stuff, because he just speeds right through a lot of these songs and doesn't really give the vocals his full attention. He's up there performing and dancing around. So this is before, they started faking all the live albums. So this sounds actually pretty real. But I would stick with the studio versions first, but a decent little Elvis live album. If you just want something quick, not a double album or something like that, I'd recommend Elvis in Person at the International Hotel. Bob Dylan, John Wesley Harding, based on John Wesley Hardin. This is where Bob Dylan, I guess, abandoned the electric stuff and the organ for a while. I love those albums, by the way. Blonde on Blonde and Highway 61 Revisited, all those. But this one, he goes right back to the acoustic. I think there's a couple of songs that add a piano in there, but pretty much it's an acoustic guitar, bass guitar, and drums, and then Bob Dylan singing like first-person storytelling type songs about cowboys and women from the 100 years ago or whatever. So it's interesting to hear that he had already gone like full electric and then come back for this one. And I believe that the country album Nashville Skyline will follow this one in 1969. So I had not heard this in quite a while. As a matter of fact, I don't remember the last time I heard this before the 50 album challenge. And a lot of great songs here, very, very mellow. Of course, the original version of All Along the Watchtower is here. There's a great little tune called Drifter's Escape that closes off side one that I absolutely love, and some other stuff kind of mixed in. But I'm not as big of a fan as Bob Dylan, the storyteller, as I am Bob Dylan, kind of the smart-ass social commentator. So not one of my favorite Bob Dylan albums, but definitely worth a listen every couple years. A blue tinfoil Santana album cover with a butterfly on it. If this record was blank, I would still love this, just because of you're in for a trippy experience when you get that. And for the most part, you are on this Santana record here, which also has a nice, pretty blue inner sleeve as well. Not any big Santana hits on this. It's really kind of free-form jazz a lot, and starts off with birds chirping and nice sound effects. Really sets the mood. This is the kind of Santana album you just kind of ease into. But yeah, Santana. Barboletta, I would definitely recommend this for just kind of a chill out album if you want to do that, but not necessarily something where you're actually going to hear a lot of Santana himself, Carlos Santana on the guitar. There's not a lot of that on here actually, and it does kind of go from the trippy kind of slower stuff into more like jazz fusion with the saxophone and a lot of it, if you can imagine that. So, but anytime you see an album cover like this, you got to pick this up and put it up. Styx, Pieces of 8. It's a Styx album. It sounds like a Styx album. Actually, on this album, all the best songs are by Tommy Shaw. Oh, wait, that's every Styx album, that all the best songs are by Tommy Shaw. Renegade's on here. Ella Fitzgerald sings the George and Ira Gershwin songbook, music arranged and conducted by Nelson Riddle. That is quite a title. Been a long time since I've heard this, and when I did hear it, I heard it once. I should have known Nelson Riddle. You see that name, you know what you're getting. And these are very lush, very adult contemporary for the time arrangements. I don't even know if I'd call this jazz. It is on the Verve label. It does have Ella Fitzgerald singing. Ella Fitzgerald's voice, it goes without saying, but I would much rather hear her with like a jazz combo where she's feel to more go with the feel of things, and there's maybe just a bass and some drums or piano or whatever. This is just way too lush. It's produced more like a Doris Day type of sound, or Teresa Brewer or something. Ella Fitzgerald I would much rather hear in a different setting, so I don't hear this a lot. One of the great things I love about jazz albums like this, though, from this time, is this excellent cover art. You really only get that with jazz albums from this period, and it just looks so modern for the time. I mean, you wouldn't have a pop release like this, or a country, or even a classical or R&B release. James Brown would not put out a cover like this. Chuck Berry would not put out a cover like this. You wouldn't get Ricky Nelson with an album cover like this. So I love the great jazz album covers where it's just like, no artist, no title. It's the painter's name there. And, people, the Beatles were the first to do that. Well, no, there's all kinds of albums that were out in the jazz world long before that. Just another quick thing about this album cover is the back here. And this is actually volume 2, by the way. But the back cover here, I mean, look at that. That's ridiculous. You got her looking like, Ella Fitzgerald looking like she is completely upset or bored or mad at something. You got this dude up here pointing his fingers at everybody. It's like, why would they choose that picture to go on the back of this? It's like, that does not scream, hey, buy this album, this is great. I mean, that's terrible. What a weird picture to put on the back of such a great looking front of an album. But if you're going to do Ella Fitzgerald, like I said, I would definitely recommend some of her live stuff done in clubs, jazz clubs, things like that, before I would go delving into Nelson Riddle Orchestra. Black Oak, Arkansas! Street Party! Yeah, Black Oak, Arkansas. I haven't listened to this in a long, long time, and I probably, when I did listen to it, it was once. Black Oak, Arkansas, if you've ever heard them, they got kind of a lead singer with kind of an unusual delivery. If you want to like stream maybe a song, when you hear his voice, just know that that's what the whole album is going to sound like. It never lets up. And so, and I'm all about outrageous, over-the-top frontman. I love the whole, like, wow, can't believe it, but a whole album of Mr. Jim Dandy, that's a little much. But this one is kind of like pretty pedestrian for these guys. I like a lot of the songs on their first album a lot, especially, you got to check out sometime their remake of Marty Robbins' Singin' the Blues. Their very first album. Some great tunes on there. This one, though, plays it pretty safe throughout. Just your basic, like, real deep Midwestern or Southern type rock. It's like if you went looking for Leonard Skinner, but you missed the exit and just kept going down the road until you found Black Oak, Arkansas. Strange to me that it starts off with a cover of Martha and the Vandellas Dancing in the Streets. It just doesn't seem like... But it does. And I guess it's a street party. So there you go. Black Oak, Arkansas. If you're going to check these guys out on a record, I wouldn't suggest necessarily this one first, but, this album's okay. Metallica, the blackest of the black. Well, actually, Spinal Tap's album is more black, and so is Prince's Black Album as far as the cover. So, well, it comes in a third, a close third for the blackest album cover, but Metallica's Metallica. You know what? When I was in rock radio in the 90s, I spent so much time playing the 5 singles off of this over and over and over and over. No, you don't understand. And over and over and over and over and over. That I really never really sat down with the CD or album a lot and listened to it. All the album tracks on there that you don't ever hear. And they're actually pretty good. Of Wolf and Man's a great song. So is Holier Than Thou. And then, of course, you have the 5 huge Metallica tracks on here. Black Album, as it's known by some, by Metallica. It's been a long time since I've heard those album tracks, but good to get reacquainted with that. And good to hear things like Inner Sandman and The Unforgiven and Wherever I May Roam and all that in the context of the album they came from. Because, like I said, I spent so much time just playing, in those individual songs all the time on the radio that it's nice to hear them back in the album, kind of in that setting again. That 90s Bob rock, hard rock sound with the processed, everything's like right there, and the drums have that real bass type sound to them. Not as extreme as it is in And Justice for All, but it is definitely there. It's kind of like, this all kind of started with And Justice for All and Motley Crue's Dr. Feelgood, and then before you know it, in the mid-90s, everybody had that sound. Everybody from like... Prong, Suicidal Tendencies, Anthrax, everybody had that sound where it was real compressed, and then you had those drums. I do a really poor imitation of a drum, obviously, but you know what I mean. That real tight bass and that real pound sound that quickly then diluted. I mean, that's a Metallica, Bob Rock, Motley Crue, late 80s, early 90s hard rock sound that is just all the way through this album. That's actually one of the things I don't care for about the album, is a lot of the songs actually, once it starts getting more towards the end of it, starts kind of sounding the same. It has that same mix throughout the whole album, even though, some of the songs are slower and faster and whatever. But you can't argue with, like, it's the best-selling hard rock album of all time or whatever, or next to Guns N' Roses or whatever. So it's hard to argue with that. So definitely glad I got reacquainted with those album tracks on Metallica. Clear Light. Yeah, I don't know too much about these guys. This is a late 60s kind of pop psychedelic album. It's on Elektra, so it's put out about the same time as like the Doors releases, but this is not as heavy as the Doors, both, psychologically and sound-wise. This is a lighter pop, kind of like a harder version of The Association. And a little weirder on some songs, especially this song called Mr. Blue that starts off side 2. That's pretty strange stuff. You don't listen to a lot of Association albums and hear bizarre stuff like you do. There's a couple tracks on here anyway. But mostly it's pretty much light fare for, like I said, a little bit of a psychedelic pop, kind of the the Association type of sound, and Alive and Kickin' or something like that. Clear Light, I guess they really didn't have any hits. I picked this up because it looked interesting. I love this guy's, face right here. That's intense. But anyway, a little medieval thing kind of look going on here. All kinds of different, you got this guy and, they're all different. A little Black Sabbath dude hanging out here in the background looking. Clear Light, it's something it's totally inessential. It's just the kind of thing if you're interested in like having a complete collection of psychedelic pop music, lighter stuff from the 60s, then you would want this. Otherwise, you could pass on Clear Light. Thin Lizzy, Fightin'. This album I don't usually listen to that often out of all the Thin Lizzy albums. I think it's because of the cover art. They kind of look like they're posed on a JCPenney catalog or something with the knee up and the hand on the, that whole deal. But all their other albums seem to have this really cool artwork, but this one, for whatever reason, doesn't. And the UK version is a lot of the same, except for they're in the street. But anyway, as far as the music goes, they do a cover of Bob Seger's Rosalie, which is pretty good. One thing about this album that sets it apart, my favorite track on here is actually the more mellow, like lighter song called Wild Ones. We've got a great guitar riff in there. A lot of good songs. There's not any like that really stand out like, oh man, that's incredible. But there's some good stuff on here. Fightin' My Way Back is kind of cheesy with its fightin' part, but some good stuff on here. Silver Dollar is a song that has got this guitar riff like, I can't, it's in another song, and I can't think of what that is. And you can't Google a guitar riff. So if anybody knows what the Silver Dollar guitar riff, what that other song, I think it might be Roller from April Wine or something, but leave that in the comment section. But overall, a decent Thin Lizzy album. There's better ones like Jailbreak and Bad Reputation and Black Rose, but this one is pretty good. But I wouldn't, if you're going to start listening to Thin Lizzy, let's say, I wouldn't necessarily do this one first. Motley Crue, Theater of Pain. Great album cover, first of all. I love the earlier Motley Crue, the Too Fast for Love and Shout at the Devil, especially. By the time this came along, I wasn't so much into them. I'm not sure why. They just kind of, I guess, sound different. I didn't understand why at the time. I wasn't, I learned more about music later, and you learn the different sounds or whatever. This is just brings back a lot of memories of like junior high and looking at the back of shirts. All the guys had the Motley Crue Theater of Pain shirt with this on the front, and if they didn't go to the concert, which none of them did, and they got it at the record store, it had the song titles on the back. And I just remember sitting in class. There was like 5 or 6 guys. They would be in front. You'd just be looking at that shirt. The whole, it'd be right in front of you, and with all the song titles. So I definitely know the song titles more than I know this album, but. Beefy guitar on here for mid-'80s, I will say that. Usually in mid-'80s kind of rock like this, you're expecting like squealing kind of high guitars, but there's some great meaty kind of 70s more kind of rock guitar on here from Motley Crue. So yeah, it's got Home Sweet Home and Fight for Your Right to Part, or not. It does have a song called Fight for Your Right, but Home Sweet Home and Smoking in the Boys' Room. So yeah, it's Motley Crue. You either love them or you don't, and this is definitely probably the most popular Motley Crue album of all time. It's just been a while since I've heard this because I just always want to hear the other ones. Sonic Youth, Evil. This is, I think, one of those albums when they refer to more as a soundscape than a lot of great little rock and roll songs or whatever. Sonic Youth, obviously a weird alternative group from the late 80s and 90s. And they kind of got more mainstream as they went on. But this is one of their earlier ones. I think this is their 3rd album. And I had not heard this in forever, since my college days. And glad I got a chance to check this out again. Like I said, kind of a soundscape. Kind of sounds like maybe a score or a soundtrack. A lot of frightening stuff on here. You've got murders being planned. You've got a song with a car crash in it in great detail. You've got celebrity culture. You've got it all here with Sonic Youth's Evil. This is one of my favorite Sonic Youth albums. I'm not too much into these guys. I don't know a lot about them, but I have heard some of their later stuff, and I definitely prefer this Evil. Glad I got to check this out again. A little bit of a discrepancy about whether the last song is called Madonna, Sean and Me or Expressway to Your Skull. We'll have to work that. It's one on the cover and then the other on the label. And if you stream it or have the CD, there's an actual bonus track called Bubblegum. That's pretty good. That is not on the record. But I am glad I got to pick this out again out of the rack and throw this on again for the 50 album challenge. Sonic Youth's Evil, if you're in the mood for something a little eerie and different. Live It Up from the Isley Brothers. 1974 this had come out. So they were pretty much established by then, but they still released a lot of albums after this one as well. Love the Isley Brothers, especially their early stuff. And this one's still early enough where it still has that raw sound to it, that raw kind of funk where it's not quite as polished as a lot of the R&B would become later. I'm not really a big fan of the overly polished, like lush, kind of perfect R&B. I much rather hear more stuff like this. And this is a really cool album. It's got a lot of great energy on it. And, you know, it's got the ballads on there. It's got the funk. It's got, like I said, kind of more of the raw sound before everything starts getting lusher, like more towards the mid-70s. Live It Up, obviously, the title track kicks it off. Fun song. A lot of fun in this, a lot of talent in this. It's the Isley Brothers, and you've got those great voices too, especially Ron Isley. Can't argue with that. One thing I did notice about this release though is unlike a lot of the later R&B releases, this one mixes the ballads with the up-tempo like funk songs. Later on, a lot of releases, including the Isley Brothers, they would do that trick where they put all the fast songs on one side and all the slow songs on the other side, and you kind of have that, you know, dance side and lovemaking side or whatever, but it's all mixed up on this one. Live It Up from the Isley Brothers. Charlie Daniels, Tay John, Grease, and Wolfman. Now this, if you'll notice right off the bat, this is Charlie Daniels, not the Charlie Daniels Band. So this is a really early solo release from him, and it definitely, even though he was a newcomer when this was out, Charlie Daniels, you know, been a studio musician of high caliber for years before this, so he already went into his solo career knowing all about studio and production and how it's all done. So this is a great album. I don't think it compares to like later like Fire on the Mountain or Night Ride or anything like that, but it's pretty good. One thing you'll notice is no fiddle. Now that might really surprise you if you're a Charlie Daniels band fan and you've never heard this early stuff, but there's no fiddle in this whole thing. It's basically a lot of organ, a lot of B. Hammond, drums and bass and some guitar every once in a while, but it's mostly got that early 70s, like I said, a lot of organ in there. Fun songs. I'll Try Again Tomorrow is on here. Black Autumn is on here. Evil, King Size Rosewood Bed. If you don't recognize any of those titles, most people don't. No hits on this thing. You don't expect, Devil Went Down to Georgia to pop up or something like that, although he does have a remake of Drinking Wine Spodioti, the old song from the 40s that's been redone. He actually slows it down a little bit, like they've already, had a little too much wine. But overall, fun album. I definitely recommend this if you like Charlie Daniels' band, to hear what he kind of sounds like in kind of a different musical phase without the fiddles and a little more early 70s kind of good time rock and roll sound. So definitely pick this up. Charlie Daniels, Tay John, Wolfman, and Grease. Tay John, Grease, and Wolfman. Marilyn Manson, Portrait of an American Family. I still remember when this first came out. I was in college and I liked it. I liked the way that they took themselves way seriously, even though they were kind of absolutely ridiculous, naming themselves after serial killers and all the makeup and the crazy lyrics and all that kind of stuff. I literally laughed out loud a couple of times when revisiting this one with just some of the over-the-top lyrics. I remember it was so outrageous. I thought it was when it came out. And now it just seems so like just middle of the road and just like everything else, all the other metal that's come out in the last 25 years or so. But it was good to revisit this one. I still like a lot of the songs, especially the ones that come earlier in the release. A lot of the 90s stuff, when everything went to CD and people had the CD mentality when making albums, everything became so long, hour long, 65 minutes long. And it's hard to digest all of that. And towards the end, it did get a little repetitious or whatever, but I still love those first few songs on this album. Marilyn Manson, Portrait of an American Family. Bob Seger, Mongrel. Mongrel, I'm not sure what number album this is. I didn't look any of that up, but yeah, Bob Seger System was what the band was known at this time. It's not the Silver Bullet Band. Some early Bob Seger here. This is before Live Bullet, Night Moves, and all that. He had about, 6 or 7 albums before all those came out, and this is one of them. Basically, just a lot of energy on this, a lot of rock and roll. I haven't heard this in so long, I forgot. That cover is a little bit misleading, because this is basically, a garage rock from Michigan, and a great guy doing it, Bob Seger. A lot of energetic songs, no hits on here. Nothing that really sticks with you or really stands out. There's no real classic kind of epic songwriting, like you'd expect, like Night Moves album or something like that. But there is some decent, great, just basic rock and roll from a young, energetic band, and then it all wraps up with a cover version of Ike and Tina's River Deep Mountain High, which there's the gender swap with the ragdoll Bob Seger trying to sound like Tina Turner is a little different, but it does end in this just terrific jam. Just great rock and roll to end that album. And with applause, too. I'm not sure if that's really a live recording or not, but they present it like it is one. But definitely if you want to hear some early Bob Seger with a lot of energy, like I said, sound quality, it's garage rock sound quality on this. I would definitely check out the Bob Seger System and Mongrel. I'm not sure if I'm cheating with this one. This is Janis Joplin, Woodstock, Sunday, August 17th, 1969. This came out on Record Store Day, and I got this as one of the Record Store Day records. But I kind of went it with the 50 album challenge just because I have heard her Woodstock performance before, but I'd never heard the actual, the vinyl because this was the first time it was released that way. Still great, still not perfect Janis. I mean, she's got better performances. It was not released for quite a while because of copyright and because of the quality control type thing. But this has the entire performance, including the song that she doesn't sing. And, just great stuff all the way through. Again, there's better performances, but you can't miss with Janis at Woodstock. I wish they would have done something more with this little insert here. I mean, you're going to buy this on Record Store Day, but you don't know who Janis Joplin is. They do have once again, the track listing and the producers and all of that, the credits, but, maybe some photos or a rare, photos from Woodstock or some kind of thing in there. But this is just kind of like something that's, just seems like it was just kind of thrown in there as just to have something in there. AC/DC, Who Made Who? Been a while since I've heard this one because this was actually the first AC/DC I ever got. It's a hodgepodge, basically. It's the soundtrack to Maximum Overdrive, Stephen King movie, from 86, and these aren't songs that were made for the movie. I mean, well, Who Made Who was new at the time, but the rest of these are all just kind of older songs that were already on AC/DC albums, and then you get a couple of instrumentals, basically. So it's really just, and it's not a lot of rhyme or reason to this. I mean, you get Who Made Who followed by You Shook Me All Night Long. Okay, there's a power 1-2 punch right there to start it off. It goes into an instrumental, kind of a forgotten song, Sink the Pink from Fly on the Wall, and then all of a sudden Bon Scott appears out of nowhere for the ballad that he did. It's like, that's the only Bon Scott on here is Right On. So it's just Hell's Bells and then kicking off side 2 and then ending with For Those About to Rock, We Salute You. So, I mean, obviously those are some great AC/DC songs. Nobody can argue that, but just really, if you want to listen to something different, if you're hearing Back in Black all the time and Highway to Hell and, all those and High Voltage all the time, maybe you want to hear something different, whip this out and hear the songs that you hear all the time, but in different order with a couple instrumentals thrown in. Midnight Star, No Parking on the Dance Floor. Now this is from the mid-'80s. It's definitely like unabashed dance floor club classics here. And we've got songs that are like 8 minutes long and things like that. But yeah, this is just a party on a record is what this are. And I'm sure this filled dance floors back in the mid-'80s. It's kind of got that Prince sound, that real super funked up R&B from the time. And this particular band, Midnight Star, you love to use that like robot voice. And I guess you know what dance to do, when that comes on. Songs like No Parking on the Dance Floor, Operator, Electricity, those were all over R&B radio back in the mid-'80s. And love the album artwork on this as well. I don't usually listen to a lot of like the 80s kind of funk and R&B and stuff like that. I usually stick with like 70s. But fun record. The Vinnie Vincent Invasion. This guy was in Kiss for a couple of minutes. Did his own thing in 1986. Really fast guitar playing. Not necessarily good solos and melodic, and you can follow, but he plays really fast. I'll give him that. This has a sticker on it that says, warning, do not open. You are not ready for this record. There's a sticker right here. It's hard to see because it's purple. Another one right here, and you have to actually slice that sticker to get it open. And when you do, you find out that it's supposed to be played at maximum volume. I've seen that on quite a few records since like the 60s. Good thing they're still doing that in the 80s. I remember when I first heard this, I thought it was so hard and extreme, and now it just kind of sounds like your basic heavy metal from the 80s album with just some kind of really generic sounding vocals. But that guitar work from Vinnie Vincent, I mean, very fast. I listened to so much Beatles that I had to pick something off the wall, so I went with the United Artists version of the Beatles' Hard Day's Night soundtrack. And that is a rechanneled stereo of Beatles songs from that movie mixed in with George Martin instrumentals. Makes it kind of, actually makes the Beatles music sound a lot more progressive because it mixes it in with these kind of like hip jazzy tunes from the 60s that are kind of more like light rock kind of stuff, and or adult contemporary, I guess, at the time. And so it's really nice to hear the Beatles against that, but other than that, it's really just kind of an unnecessary thing. I do like the album artwork actually is a little more bold on this. I like this better than the UK one, just because it's got that big booming red, and then you just see the four big faces instead of the like the film strip kind of thing they have on the other one. Hartsfield. I don't know too much about these guys. They're an early 70s kind of country rock kind of group, and they certainly fall directly right into that category. It's been like like all these albums, it's been years and years and years since I've heard Hartsfield, but I was pleasantly re-surprised, I guess, to find out how good this is. Coming Home is a great song that just sets the whole tone, sets the whole mood, kicks it right off in high energy. It does have a few like rockers in there, but mostly it's your basic country rock, early 70s type of music, and it's done really well. It's real basic, no surprises, no strange interludes or anything like that, just your basic country rock, but like I said, done really, really well by Hartsfield. So there it is. Thank you so much for watching. That's my 50 album challenge. I did it. If you're doing it, definitely let us know all about it, and please link the videos here. I'm sure more people will see your video than mine anyway, but you never know. And please comment, like, subscribe, all that stuff if you want. I would love to hear some opinions about my opinions. I'm sure we don't agree on everything, so that'd be fun. And keep watching for video updates. I'm not sure what kind of record or music videos I want to do. I guess that depends on what kind of comments I get. So, but again, thank you for watching. We're well over an hour now of me just standing here talking about records, but it was awfully fun. The 50 album challenge, and thanks again to YouTube channel 33 RPM for coming up with this and making us all dig a little deeper into our record collections.